Why are superheroes so intriguing? Why is a kid bitten by a radioactive spider and fighting in a red tight suit interesting? Why is an alien from outer space with his underwear outside of his tights fighting monsters and robots so engaging? That is because it explores the world of fiction. It explores the imaginations that run deep inside of our heads and let us see these imaginations run wild. To the point that after iteration after iteration after iteration after iteration after iteration, we as an audience still care and go explore the realm of superheroes. Doesn't matter if it's buying tickets to watch a movie, buying a video game, or buying a comic book. Doesn't matter if it's buying merchandises like clothes or action figures, superheroes will always be compelling. And why not? It is an entertaining, thrilling, action-packed, mesmerizing, fun genre that isn't specific to one group and everyone can enjoy. Even though it's primarily aimed for a younger audience, boys, girls, men, women, younger and older people can be appealed to this genre. And I know that there are other fictional stories out there that do the exact same thing, like building an intergalactic world when it comes to Star Wars, or the impact that slasher movies have done to give us iconic characters like Jason or Freddy. But for me, I think that superheroes do it the best because of the way it impacts not just one, but all of multimedia. To the point that in the world of cinematography, 16 out of the top 50 grossing films are superhero movies. To the point that in the world of animation, Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse got the Best Animated Feature Award back in 2019.
And the Oscar goes to Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse.
And Batman the Animated Series is considered one of, if not the best animated superhero show of all time. To the point that in the world of gaming, Batman Arkham City was one of the nominations of Game of the Year back in 2011, and Batman Arkham Asylum redefined what a superhero game should be like. To the point that in the world of comic books, Superman Doomsday shocked audiences with the death of the Man of Steel and actually had a reaction when it came to a fictional character. No matter where, the popularity of superheroes and multimedias are always going to be recognized. You could be into the army or a soldier or a veteran yourself and be fascinated to the likes of Captain America or the Punisher. You can be invested with romance to the point that you debate if Mary Jane or Black Cat is a better relationship for Peter Parker, or Talia al Ghul or Catwoman is a better relationship for Batman. You can idolize heroes like Spider-Man or Superman because of their qualities of wanting to help others and never giving up, and you want to embed these qualities into yourself. Also, it is such a creative world and fantasy that we as the audience want to put ourselves in.
How come nobody's ever tried to be a superhero?
Either as the narrator, the cameraman, or just as an extra, but we want to live in these fantasies just for a bit. According to Jason Carney, who is a senior lecturer in the Department of English of Christopher Newport, he talks about the value of reading fiction and the value it has on its audience. In his TED Talk, he asks us the question,
is it the job of the writer? Is it the only job of the writer to reveal the tragic nature of the world? The way we are the victims of the capricious gods? Or can it also be the job of the writer to teach us to hope, to maybe leave the world for a little bit, if only for a little while?
Which I feel to be the case of why this subgenre is so popular even after all these years, especially for me as a fan of comics and superheroes. And this is the main reason why I enjoy superheroes myself. We want to escape the harsh reality of the world. Not to the point that we completely neglect it and forget all about it, but we want that escape. We want to explore the world of what if superheroes were actually real? What if we were that lucky few to have access to superpowers? What if we had that choice to be good or evil? What if we had that responsibility? What if we were able to live in these stories and indulge in that possibility? Or it's also just a way to relive that childhood you once had. You know, the one you were running in your backyard with your best friend and you guys pretended to be these very heroes that you grew up with. Now I know that probably all sounds ridiculous and maybe to not that extent. So maybe you just like these stories that these heroes tell. You enjoy the wonders that they bring and the crazy stories that they inform you about. You're always wanting for the next crazy issue or crazy episode to unfold, and you just enjoy these stories because they are just fun for you. Or maybe not fully leave the realistic world we live in, but have a toned down, not so harsh view of it. Another TED Talker that I saw had the talker Chuck Adler. Chuck Adler is a physics professor at St. Mary's College of Maryland, and he states that when it comes to science fiction and fantasy,
this is why science fiction and fantasy are so important to me. They push us beyond our daily struggles. They don't hide us from them. They give us perspective on them.
This is why superheroes are so powerful. They are able to tell stories that are not completely fantasy, but they can also tell stories that are more realistic with their own spin on it that are still powerful. Young Justice talks about racism when Miss Martian was afraid to show her team her white Martian form because back on Mars the green Martians will neglect her due to the color of her skin.
I realized you would never accept me if you saw what I really am.
McGann, did we truly seem so shallow?
I couldn't take the chance. Being a white Martian among the green on Mars, I endured constant rejection. I couldn't face that.
Batman Beyond talks about drugs and the impact that it has on kids when we see teens abusing drugs to feel stronger and better. And even though there are people out there that genuinely look out for them and their well-being, the wrong crowd and the addiction of drugs overpower all. Iron Man 3 talks about people that are dealing with anxiety attacks. Captain America the First Avenger addresses the impact of war and the effect that it has on veterans. Captain America the Winter Soldier talks about a man at a time and how that man has become accustomed to a different era due to being away from his hometown for so long. Either it gives us that break from reality or references real life events in a cartoon or fictional way. But at the end of the day, superhero fiction and fiction as a whole gives us a fantasy that we can explore. Now what if that fantasy is invaded, even more than the little references about real life incidents? What if that fantasy is crumbled and it blurs the line even more than what it was intended? What if the word super and superhero doesn't mean anything anymore? What if you watching right now in Superman, a godlike character that is the beacon of hope and this invulnerable character held the same life value? What happens when you bleed over fantasy with reality? What happens when you see blood in superhero fiction?
See you in hell.
Blood is seen as a more realistic subject that is used in film. We see in horror films to associate someone was killed off. We see in action-packed movies where there's a fight scene and it displays wounds and cuts. Blood is helpful to see at some points because depending on the film, it can look too unrealistic without it. Imagine you're watching an action-packed movie and there's a big shootout scene and bullets are flying, bodies are flying, but there's no blood flying. Even though it's a fictional film, we as the audience need that scenery of blood because it makes the atmosphere more believable. A show like The Walking Dead is great because even though it's a fictional show with a fictional story, it sets the atmosphere to make it more believable and realistic in the setting of the show. But does there need to be a more realistic atmosphere in superhero media? The whole point of a superhero fiction is that we want to see the hero triumph over the obstacles, overcome any and all odds, struggle but push on through, beat the bad guy, and save the day. That is what superhero fiction is. Also, it's a bit weird because like I mentioned earlier, even though the audience is huge, it's primarily aimed for a younger child. So why would you show blood in a show that is primarily aimed for a younger viewer? You have shows like Spectacular Spider-Man, Justice League and Justice League Unlimited, The Batman, and Teen Titans. Sure, they have violence in them, but they are good because they talk about real life situations that are going on, or make us live in a fantasy world that we can just unwind and relax, make us excited, make us laugh, make us joyful, make us feel inspired. And then you see something like this. Something this graphic, so horrifying, so misplaced in a cartoon that seems like it should be in a rated R show or movie. You obviously have cartoons or superhero fictional stories that dive deep into a more graphic, mature setting, like The Boys, Invincible, Spawn, and Watchmen. But those shows already established their atmosphere. They already established that they're going to be a more realistic superhero show that isn't aimed for a younger audience and dive deep into more adult topics and conversations. But I want to look at other sources of superhero shows, movies, and animations and see if the usage of blood was necessary. I want to revisit some examples that I remember as a child and some I see now and dive deep if blood ruled out that fictional atmosphere, or was it needed to enhance the story? I want to explore why I think blood was used in the first place and did it capture or ruin the meaning behind the show. But I do want to ask the question, does blood deteriorate the sense of fiction in superhero visual media? Or does it enhance it in a way that makes us care and believe more in the stories? The first example of usage of blood that I want to explore is in the first episode of Batman Beyond. Batman Beyond aired on January 10, 1999 and was a continuation of the beloved Batman the Animated Series and the New Batman Adventures which aired from 1992 to 1999. Originally, Batman Beyond was supposed to be a more kid-friendly program that displayed Bruce Wayne as a teenager this time around and be aimed for children after his predecessors were cancelled. Batman the Animated Series and the new Batman Adventures, though beloved by fans and considered one of, if not the best animated superhero show of all time, were cancelled due to a couple of reasons. The first reason was that Fox started to air new episodes of Batman the Animated Series on primetime Sunday evening in 1992, but was competing with another show airing at the exact same time, that being 60 Minutes. They weren't getting the ratings that they were aiming for, so they had to go back to airing on weekdays afternoon in 1993, and then solely airing on Saturday mornings in 1994 with a retool titled The Adventures of Batman and Robin. Even after reviving the series with the new Batman Adventures after Batman the Animated Series was cancelled in 1995, they weren't getting the ratings that they were desiring. Another reason was because they were running out of ideas. According to Kevin Conroy, who voiced act Batman throughout both shows, he stated that
they didn't stop making the shows because the audience wasn't there or the actors weren't there. They stopped really because the creators ran out of ideas for stories, and they didn't want to compromise on the quality of what they'd had and start creating kind of silly stories. So they thought, look, we got to go in a whole new different direction. So then they went to Batman and Robin. They brought in Robin. That was the next series. Then they went into Batman Beyond, recruiting a young guy. And then it was the Justice League. They're always looking at different ways to reimagine the characters just so they could get new storylines. A lot of it had to do with trying to come up with stories that weren't becoming ridiculous.
But they still weren't going to give up. Warner Brothers still wanted to make that Batman series. They still wanted to make a show that was more PG appropriate for kids, and they really were pushing the young Bruce Wayne idea. Bruce Timm, the producer of Batman the Animated Series, suggested something differently though. Something that would appeal to the head of Warner Brothers but not jeopardize his work and his continuity of the Batman animated universe. He suggested that he would make a younger, new, more kid-appealing Batman, but not Bruce Wayne. Instead of a new series with a new storyline reintroducing the same characters, he would continue the Batman story chronicle and place it into the future. And that is how Batman Beyond came to be. And again, even though they wanted it to be for a younger audience, the first episode sets the tone of the show. I was very young when I saw this scene, and I was baffled by what I just witnessed. Life was good though, because I was and still am a huge Batman fan. I was enjoying life quite well. Batman Begins came out, plus the tie-in game, the second season of The Batman, and the film Batman vs. Dracula came out. And yes, I'm aware that Batman Begins and Batman vs. Dracula had blood in them, but it wasn't as impacting as the opening scene in Batman Beyond. Batman Begins showed Bruce Wayne defeated but rising up and defeating the villain. Batman vs. Dracula usage of blood was showed just as something to cure vampires. This use of blood, however, doesn't have any positive emotions behind it. It shows a very defeated, terrifying, suffering old man. A man that had to use the very same weapon that took both of his parents from him just to survive. And I believe that this was shown to display the first reason why I think they use blood: emotions. Batman at this point is out of his prime. He has to use a very high-tech suit just to keep up. And while on a mission to save a hostage, he is fighting a bunch of goons, something Batman can do very easily. But due to his old age, he starts to have a heart attack and starts losing the fight, and at the brink of losing his life. And then he pulls a gun on the goon not to even win the fight, but just to survive. This wasn't Joker, or Bane, or Scarecrow, or Killer Croc, or any of Batman's rogue gallery. This was an ordinary guy that beat him due to his age gap. Now sure, this face alone will make you feel sorry for him, but this addition of blood helps amplify it because it shows that Batman is old. He isn't the same man that he used to be anymore, and most importantly, he was about to break his very important rule.
I don't use a gun because Batman doesn't kill.
Still, criminals are always trying to kill Batman. Are you telling me you've never once considered a gun?
Never. It would violate my code.
So, Batman has a code.
Without it, I would become the very thing I hate.
A rule that he promised himself since the beginning of this journey. A promise that he made to the people of Gotham, to himself, and most importantly, the people that he's doing it for. Sure, he didn't shoot, but if it came down to it, he probably was going to. The shaking of his hands holding the gun amplified this scene. His scared face, his defeated posture all tells that he hit rock bottom. But the usage of blood amplifies the death of the Dark Knight. Never again will he don the outfit, never again will he put himself in this situation again.
Never again.
Will Bruce Wayne be Batman? Or did the usage of blood defeat the purpose of what the show was trying to accomplish? Be a show for a younger audience. In the first 3 minutes, you realize that this isn't going to be a lighthearted show. This is a more mature show that tackles heavy topics and is probably just as violent or even more violent than its predecessor. Or maybe it did reveal an emotion towards you, an angry, furious emotion, because how can they do this to your favorite character? Batman the Animated Series and the new Batman Adventures display Batman always winning, always coming out on top, always overcoming any odds. That was the routine of these animated shows. So seeing your character that you grew up with beating the likes of Killer Croc, overcoming his fears and defeating Scarecrow, overcoming an impossible obstacle and beating Riddler, losing to an ordinary goon must make you feel disrespected. He didn't lose to Joker, or Bane, or Harley Quinn, or Hugo Strange, or anyone in that matter. He lost to a guy that Batman has defeated multiple times. So, did blood actually make us care more about this scene and feel remorse towards our hero and the show as a whole? Or did it neglect the very reason that it was made in the first place and make you have a negative emotion that made you feel that they disrespected your favorite hero and making Batman look weak? This is the same thing in regards to Batman Beyond, Return of the Joker. In this animated film, we see the story of the Joker in this universe. Because even though Joker is Batman's arch nemesis and probably the most important and favorite Batman villain ever, he never appeared in Batman Beyond. Sure, there is a gang named after him, but we never see the Joker. In this film, he appears, but Bruce Wayne is surprised because he states that he died many years ago.
So how is it possible he could still be around after all this time?
It's not possible. He died years ago.
You're sure?
I was there.
After not getting a straight answer from Bruce, Terry goes to Barbara to find out what happened. Barbara Gordon then explains to Terry what happened to the Joker. She explains that the Joker took the Robin at the time, Tim Drake, hostage, and Batman and Batgirl tried to find him, but they never succeeded. After a few weeks, they finally found him, but the Joker manipulated him and drugged him up so that he was a junior version of the Joker. Batman goes at the Joker, and while he is chasing him, Joker displays what he did to Robin. They both start to fight, and we see a sight of blood. Then with the last sense of his sanity, Robin points the gun at Joker and shoots. This scene makes you feel for everyone. We feel terrified for Batman begging and pleading to Robin, his sidekick, his partner, his son, to find himself. We feel terrified of Joker because though he is bleeding and hurt, he is smiling. Smiling that he might finally win the war between the two and satisfied with the work that he has accomplished. And heartbroken for Robin, to see a child go through this pain that he went through. To see how this bright, remarkable, intelligent child became this dark figure. And to see the tears roll down his face, you can't do anything but feel sorrow for him. Sure, the amount of blood is small and is running down their mouth and nothing too gory like a rated R film. But the sight of this plus what the Joker did to Robin just leaves you speechless at the lengths that this character can do. But does it in a way draw you back? Because maybe it's too disturbing. Does the blood make you feel icky, uncomfortable, sick to your stomach, unpleasant? Well, you might not be the only one because this film has a censored version of it. The censored version of this film changed the way Joker died in this film, and changed dialogue so that the tone isn't as harsh and more suitable for kids.
Here you go, sonny boy. Make Daddy proud. Deliver the punchline. Here you go, sonny boy. Make him one of us.
Also making the violent less violent. The Joker, instead of getting shot, gets electrocuted, and there isn't any sight of blood during this scene. Sure, it is still in a way graphic and jarring to see, but it cuts away from the action. We saw Joker gasping for his last breath, the flag inside of Joker dropping to the floor and not moving an inch. In the censored version, it cuts and we don't see any bodies at all, and we don't see the aftermath of what happened. So which one is better? The censored one, which captures that scenery of being a kid cartoon and still has that atmosphere of being kid friendly? Or the uncensored one, which makes you feel more and keeps you on the edge of your seat and can't wait to see what unfolds next? and what makes you have a reaction towards these characters and have a connection towards the film. The next example that I want to talk about is knowing your characters and in a way hitting the restart button. Due to many stories that these characters go through or are in, you have a certain perspective of these characters. Superman is supposed to be this godlike character that always sees the good in everything and believes in a better world. Batman is this dark being that lets his world consume him to the point that we as the fans don't know if the mask is Bruce Wayne or Batman. How Spider-Man is this kid that was gifted with these powers, and his selfish actions cost him his uncle, and now he has to learn with
great power comes great responsibility.
The idea is that we know a character, or at least their morals, or how they should act. So does it seem right to have Batman blowing up cars or deliberately killing goons? Does it seem right to have Deadpool, the merc with the mouth, have no mouth? And does it seem right to have a bunch of villains who murder, steal, and doesn't care about anyone but themselves going on a suicide mission being a PG-13 movie? Suicide Squad 2016 is considered to be a very bad movie, one of the worst movies in the DCEU, due to the story, due to the characters, due to it not being very interesting, and due to it not making sense in the timeline of the universe. The DCU started in 2013 with the release of Man of Steel. By that time, the MCU was already deep in their cinematic universe to the point that they were already in their second phase and already did their big team-up film. Marvel did films that introduced their main characters in solo films before having them do their big team-up film. DC, trying to catch up, had their first film being a Superman film, which was great. You're introducing the main character of the DC universe and the Justice League. Then the second film was an introduction to the likes of Batman, and also Wonder Woman, and also the rest of the Justice League, and then Doomsday. Then the third film was about a bunch of criminals that had nothing to do with the Justice League. The film just felt misplaced and a disaster to say the least. Then you had characters that had guns and lethal weapons, but there was no blood in sight. Instead, it was just this weird black goo. It didn't make any sense to the characters, and it didn't make any sense to the story. Why would you have two films introducing the Justice League and then having a film introducing a bunch of other characters not associated with the Justice League at all? James Gunn stated that,
well, it was simple. I was writing the screenplay, I had pitched it, and I talked to Peter Safran, who's the producer and my manager, and I think this thing's going to be rated R. I have to know that they're cool with me writing a rated R script because, and at first I had only committed to writing it. I didn't commit to directing it because I wasn't quite ready to make such a long-term commitment. I said, it's going to be rated R because it's like a war film. And I have a real big aversion to war films or gun films where people are getting shot and it's just they're getting thrown back and it's impact, but no real repercussions to the violence. And so I hate that kind of stuff, and I'm the only way I can do this and not have it be rated R is if I have them fighting a bunch of robots or something. And I don't want to make a movie with a bunch of robots. I want to make a war film. And so they were like, okay, you can write it rated R. And then when I was finished with it, then they asked me to direct it, and I said I'll do it under two conditions. They were both conditions they hated. One of which was it needs to be rated R, and the other was which I needed to shoot in Atlanta, Georgia, because my father was dying, and he lived in St. Louis, and they wanted to shoot in the UK, and I couldn't be that far away from my dad.
James Gunn knew what he had at his disposal, and he knew how to portray these characters. He had criminals. Criminals that committed illegal actions, criminals that killed, criminals that did wrong. So he knew how to show these characters in their habitat. Also, this film is a reboot and a sequel to the 2016 film. So in a way, it was a continuation to the original story, but also a restart button by killing off some of the characters that were in the original film. Those characters dying was a way to tell us that this was something new, something fresh. Something that tells us don't expect this just to be a continuation of the 2016 film, but instead we're going to do things our own way. Or did the 2021 Suicide Squad film fail to do what the 2016 Suicide Squad film accomplished, making a film that was accessible to everyone? While the 2021 version of the film was 100 times better than its 2016 counterpart, did it need to be that violent to be better? I remember a film that had a dark, violent, probably one of the most violent comic book characters ever in a PG-13 setting, yet it still captured the characteristics of that character. That person I'm referring to is the Joker in The Dark Knight. The Dark Knight is considered one of the best superhero movies ever, and the way they displayed the Joker was remarkable. You had a character that was still as dark and evil as its comic book persona, yet it was all managed in a PG-13 rating, which means anyone can watch it. You had a character that was just as twisted yet brilliant. You had a character that was just as challenging to the Dark Knight and made him really go over the edge to defeat him. You had a character that was still confusing yet mysterious. The Dark Knight's version of the Joker didn't need to be as gory to be good. So did the Suicide Squad need to go there? Could the film have been the exact same with a PG-13 rating and still have been excellent? Did the usage of blood help the film or not? Both Suicide Squad films are a part of a cinematic universe, and depending on your age or your taste in films, you are only able to watch one of them. Even though the 2016 film is bad, it is still a film that can be watched by all. Now with this rated R rating in the 2021 version, you are missing out on information or a film in that universe. You aren't allowed to watch the universe unfold, there are pieces in your mind missing. You are missing out on the experience of seeing these films tie into each other, reveals that you have been waiting for to unravel in multiple films. So yeah, you might have a violent character at your disposal, but does that mean you have to display it to your audience? Do you have to show that blood, that violence? Or maybe you could show it in a way that doesn't disturb other people and have a film that everyone can enjoy. So does blood need to be shown for these violent characters? Or can you find a way to honor that character so that everyone can witness it and understand who that character actually is? Then you have something like Hulk vs. This film, when I saw it as a kid, was different from anything I have ever seen yet in the world of superheroes. In 40 minutes, it was able to capture so much and express a great deal as well. But what they really expressed was how violent this was going to be. Like, it is really bloody, yet it is still just a PG-13 rating movie. But this connects to the Suicide Squad, knowing your characters. Wolverine is immune with adamantium claws, so why have a film with this character and not show blood? I know they have done this in the past with X-Men, X-Men 2, X-Men Origins Wolverine, but I want to show you a scene from Hulk versus X-Men 2, and I want you to see which one looks more believable. The Hulk versus scene really displayed what kind of movie this was going to be and knew their characters and who they were. Or could you have done it in a way like X-Men did, or even Venom did? Manipulating the film in a way that honors these characters' violent habits, but did it in a way that wasn't as violent. Did it need to be as bloody? And did the usage of blood impact the film in a positive way, or did it do it in a negative way? Another reason why I think there is blood in superhero media is to embrace relatability. Growing up, we all wanted to have superpowers. We all turned on our first superhero show and were mesmerized by this fantasy world that was being bestowed upon us. It had an impacting feeling when we finished it. We waited and waited to get our powers, hoping that we could mimic these very heroes, hoping to find that we can have the same strength as them. We hope that we could be the very heroes that we watch on TV, and we enjoy the idea of just being super. And our parents told us the words that ruined that sense of imagination. It's not real. Well, I'm here to tell you that isn't true actually. Superheroes are real. Now, not to the extent of being able to fly and have super speed, but they are not fake when it's time to show their relatability. And this time comes when superheroes bleed, when they show a fracture of not weakness but tenderness and exposure. When heroes bleed in superhero media, it strips them and leaves them open for audiences to see them fully as themselves. Not as someone who does impossible feats very easily, but someone closer to a person watching, almost like a persevere. Because just like heroes, they share that same vulnerability as us. Just like us, heroes understand what it's like to fall in love, but they also understand what it's like to lose the love of their life and not being able to get the person of their dream. They also know what it's like to find a friendship that can last a lifetime, but they also know what it's like to have their brother become their worst enemy. They know what it's like to stand up to a bully, but they also understand what it's like to become the very thing that they fight against. We tend to forget that these heroes go through instability because we remember just the colorful scenes when they are fighting, suiting up, having their big team up scene. But when they show that relatability, we are reminded that they are just human behind the suit. They deal with everyday lives just as we do and deal with the pain of choices and regrets just as we do as well. Blood brightens that fact up. Spider-Man 1 is the origin story of Spider-Man. We are witnessing the birth of this hero and the rise of New York's finest. But then when we see him bleed in the ending fight between Green Goblin, we are reminded that this is just a kid. A kid that is just learning to become a man, a kid that just recently graduated from high school and is now thrown into the real world. A kid that wants to get the girl, a kid that gets bullied a lot. Blood helps us remember that under that strength, under all those abilities, it is just a kid that shares that same relatability just as us. Or maybe that isn't the use of blood, because they tell a story of vulnerability in Spider-Man 2 without the use of any blood. Spider-Man 2 tells the story of Peter Parker's downfall, and they do it in a way that uses the story to tell us this. No blood added. We see Peter Parker losing half of himself, losing the girl of his dream, losing his best friend, being late to work, losing his job, losing a family member that he thought would understand why he did what he did. So what do you think shows this vulnerability? Do you think it is the use of blood, or do you think it's the pacing of the story and how we see a glimpse of our everyday choices in these films? But let's not forget the shows or the movies that whole premise is to have blood in them. But how would these medias be if they were PG-13? Would they still be great? Would they still hold value? Would they still get their point across? Let's look at the first episode of Invincible. Until the last part of the first episode, if you don't know what the comic book's about just like me, this looks like a typical morning cartoon show. You think nothing of it, and even though there's a little sign of blood in it, this looks like something you would typically watch Saturday morning. And it looks fantastic. It looks intriguing, and the characters in the costume look interesting. And then you have a son trying to not only impress his favorite hero, but also his father.
Hit me.
What?
Hit me now. Do it. I wasn't ready before, now I am. I can take it. Come on.
I'm not gonna hit you.
You never hit me before, okay? It scared me, it wasn't too much, I could take the pain. I'm strong.
I know you are.
No, you don't! I know you think I can't do this. Hit me and let me prove you wrong. I'm strong enough, and I can do this. It's all I ever wanted for as long as I can remember. I want to do what you do. I want to be just like you.
Knowing that if he wants to make an impression, he has big shoes to fill in. Not knowing if he will be enough to be the world's greatest hero like his idol, but also a perfect son for his father. That alone was a very powerful story about a rising star. But then you get introduced to the last few minutes of episode 1.
Oh no.
Both visions of the show are great in their own way. Great at telling a story, great at capturing the audience's interest. But what was it specifically? What was it that captured your reaction, your interest, your attention? Was it the graphic tone that the show displayed? Was it the realism of the show that made you want to see more? Or was it that warm, comfortable feeling of unwinding and going for a ride, giving you that feeling you once had when you were introduced to the likes of Superman, Batman, Spider-Man, Wolverine, and Iron Man, where you get to go on this journey with them and explore their characters. You find new heroes to root for and new villains to boo. So is blood needed in superhero media? Does the blood ruin the sense of imagination and ruin the fictional side of these stories? Or does it enhance it in a way that makes you care, makes you value these characters more because there isn't that sense of safety anymore? It isn't corny or typical anymore, instead you are constantly on your toes and rooting for your character to overcome all odds. Me personally, I think having blood in superhero media is needed, because it makes the media more intricate. I don't think we should shy away from the use of blood. Blood in a way helps us get to a sense of urgency. When you see blood on your screen, you care more about the repercussions. Then all of a sudden you are sharing the same feelings as the characters in the story. You're feeling the same way you once felt in your life, or you're getting new feelings altogether. You're losing with the characters, growing with them, fighting with them, winning with them. Blood makes the story more believable because it puts you in the story. It elevates the purpose of the scene. I'm not saying that all superhero media needs to be rated R, but some side of blood is good for it. It makes you believe more in the consequences and it makes you care more about the story.